Hi, my name is Deb from DG Reads, and it's time for another Architect. So Architect is a series I introduced in July, and it's basically just an excuse to catch up on some arcs I need to get to, with the objective of bringing you some spoiler-free reviews of new, very recently released books and some upcoming titles. With this vlog, I don't know exactly what I'm going to get in this month and get to you in the space of this vlog, but I have quite a few books I'm really interested in, so it's going to be a good time regardless. I didn't put Kailee back in the shark costume just yet. She's been a little under the weather recently, so we're going to take it easy on her and not put her in a super warm costume at the moment. But Crumble Cookies did come out with a shark sugar cookie right after I scheduled my first Arc Attack video, so I did pick up one of those to help me get some energy going and get to some arcs. Summer feels like the perfect time for me for a good thriller. I love reading a book that will grab my attention and distract me from how hot it is outside. I love a good fantasy in summer. Short stories are always great when life gets busy and I want to put in some pages in between doing different things, and I'm always down for some horror. This month I really am hoping to love these books, especially because I am participating in Battelathon, and the higher I rate the books, the better I can help my team out with getting some extra points. So there's a lot of motivation to at least read a lot this month. I of course will be bringing honest thoughts and honest ratings to my books regardless, but here's hoping that we do get a lot of wins. So to start things off, I'm not going to give you a lot of information on it yet because I don't know much yet, but I am starting with a author that I know very well can bring me 5-star reads, and that's Jessie Q. Sutanto. She has a new book coming out this month. I believe it's on August 20th, and it is You Will Never Be Me. It sounds like this is a book about a toxic friendship relationship, and I'm eager to get going in it so I can let you know more. So once I get to kind of the midway point, I'll be back with some additional thoughts. Kailee and I are back because we got halfway into You Will Never Be Me, and I'm here for some thoughts. She's just here for the ride as she was feeling like being held this morning. My feelings on this book are pretty mixed right now. I think it's not feeling like 5-star potential like I had hoped when I picked up a new Jessie Q. Sutanto book, but I am liking it. It's extremely readable, very bingeable, so from that aspect, it was a good book to pick up. We're following two frenemies, former friends. I don't know what exactly I would call them even. They are both social media influencers, mom influencers, and one of them was sort of more established than the other to begin with, and the other one sort of took over that role of being super popular. Both of them have huge followings, both of them have their own successes, but something went wrong in their relationship. One of them wound up getting married, having children, and kind of surpassing their friend in that regard as well. And at the stage we're at now, we're following both perspectives. One of them is struggling in her life, in her career, with a husband who doesn't really get it. She's the big money winner with her influencing money, but he is bitter about that and doesn't really buy into the whole thing and his role in it. And then the other friend is looking on from afar and witnessing the fact that her former friend looks perfect on Instagram, but in reality isn't. There's a lot of undercutting happening. They're sniping at each other from a distance at this point since they really don't spend time together. And it's a lot of adults behaving badly, and it's not necessarily making me feel very warm to either of the characters. Like I said, it's extremely readable. Want to know what's happening next. The lengths this one friend will go to try to take down her former friend are very extreme and very intriguing, but I'm not sure in the end where the plot is taking things and exactly how I'm going to feel about it in the end. So I look forward to continuing and finding out the answer to that. And for now, I'm going to snuggle the puppy a little bit before I have to go to work. I have finished You Will Never Be Me by Jessie Q. Sutanto, and I'm here with final thoughts. And thankfully, they're a lot more positive than they were at the very beginning. And I think this is an author that I do have trust can turn things around for me, and that definitely happened with this book. There was a big shift and twist that happened kind of right after that halfway point when I checked in with you last time, and that made a big difference. I started to get more invested in it at that stage and seeing where things were going. It still remains a book without really characters that you're going to be pulling for fully, or I should say without characters I personally was pulling for a whole lot personally, but it got to the stage of being so wild that you can't look away, and that I really appreciated about it. It had some interesting discussion points. I'm part of a buddy read group for this, so it'll be really interesting to talk about it and see how everyone felt about it. I think this is a book that if you go into it expecting to have some pretty bad characters and some really bad decision making along the way, you can definitely get enjoyment out of this. It's really a page turner. It's one that's easy to fly through once you really get invested into it. I don't find myself super drawn into stories where parenthood is a major plot point, and it definitely is in here, so that might have also played into this not being my favorite Jessie Q Sutanto, but it did wind up at a low 4-star, like a 3.5 rounded to 4, but still a book that I did enjoy. So hopefully we get some big 5-star winners from here. This one wasn't quite that. I'm hoping for a month of successes, but it was still a good time and a good way to start off this vlog. So I'll be back once I pick up my next arc. Okay, I decided to dig into my ARC backlist for the next book that I picked up, and this is The Taste of Tiny Bones by Vincent Heselwood, and I received a gifted copy of this one from Horrorsmith, and it came out on July 4th, and it got buried a little bit in my email, so I recently rediscovered it and decided I was in the mood for a creepy read. This one is a fairly short, possibly not quite novella length, I think it's like 220 pages, but a fairly short horror book, and I am so glad that I wound up picking this up because I've been loving it so far. This is looking like 5-star potential for me. Trigger warnings before I even go any further with this is it deals in child death, so if that's something you don't want to hear at all about, fast forward a little bit, skip on past this book. This one is dealing with children, with monsters under the bed and in the closet, and it doesn't go well for our child characters. The book opens with Alfie, who's a young boy who is scared of the dark. His father has said he needs to grow up, turned off the nightlight, and poor Alfie, things don't go well for him. This is a creature that comes out from under the bed and he gets eaten. This is chapter 1. This is not a big spoiler. From there, we wind up meeting Evie, who has the nickname of Creepy. And as a young child, she loved horror. She's loved horror all of her life, and even though it gave her terrible nightmares, she still has always been drawn to the genre. And she is called in by the police related to Alfie's death and to the death of another child because her name is somehow tied into things. And we start following her as kind of our main POV, I think, and she has been doing research into horror, basically, and how horror spreads. And there's been so many interesting conversations about folklore, about how different horror entities are kind of built up. And one of the examples being vampires, which I found really interesting because I just posted my vampire vlog, and talking about how entities change over time, how things are newly kind of changing, how that happens thanks to the internet. And I think the writing in this is fantastic. There's some great imagery going on. I think the discussions on storytelling and folklore and mythology and how all of that develops is just really interesting. And the creepy moments are creepy, and there's definitely gore going on. There's definitely grief going on. There's just so many things in here that really work well for me in books. So I'm hopeful this could be a nice 5-star horror for me. I am flying through it. I started it last night. Unfortunately, I needed sleep, so I continued it this morning. But it's a very quick read. It's short. It's getting to the point really well, I think. There's been quotes I've been highlighting. I can definitely relate to Evie as a character, being someone who really enjoyed reading horror growing up as well. Although I don't remember it super much giving me nightmares or having the fear of things under the bed or the closet quite so much. But it definitely, reading this in the dark last night, gave a few creepy moments. So I appreciated that as well. So I'll be back once I have final thoughts. Hopefully they're good ones. And I'll chat with you then. I have officially now finished The Taste of Tiny Bones, and I'm pleased to report that we have our first 5-star arc. This book took me by surprise. I wasn't expecting to really just fall in love with it, and I am definitely very intrigued to read more from this author. This is an author that has ghostwritten. I'm not sure for who, and has written under another name that I need to look up, but this is their first book under their name, so I will be keeping an eye on them in the future. I think what worked really well for me in this book was the blend of horror and truly creepy moments that preyed on kind of a universal idea of things that are scary, of things that go bump in the night, of dark shadows in your bedroom and you're a little bit creeped out, and some of those things, along with just the idea of storytelling and how stories move from person to person and how lore develops and all of those types of things. I think I talked about most of that at the halfway point. There's not a ton more I say because it is such a short book about the plot going past that halfway point when I updated you the first time, but this was an easy one sitting binge read. So I'm super excited about it. It was one I debated even throwing in because it did come out on July 4th and therefore is a little bit further back than I was intending to go in this particular vlog, but I'm so glad that I wound up throwing it in. It really set my Sunday off to a fantastic start. And then I also have another update. And that is that I am in the middle of Asunder by Kerstin Hall, and this is a gifted copy from TorDotCom. I also have the audiobook from Macmillan Audio and NetGalley. So I actually started this on Friday and started it doing a little bit of immersion reading while I was running some reading sprints, and I think that was really the way to go with this. We're following a character, Kerstin, and she can communicate with the dead. She made a deal years back with an eldritch creature to give her this ability. She's able to use it to kind of make ends meet for herself by investigating people's deaths, people who have gone missing and are presumed dead, and making some money along the way. Her latest job, as we open the book, is going really, really wrong. She winds up encountering some really scary beings, and her life is in peril, and she has to find her way out. The job has gone sideways. She's most likely not going to get paid for it. So when she runs into a man who is in the same place she is, who is dying and doesn't think he can escape, she makes a bargain with him for a bunch of money to get him out, basically. But in the process of doing this, through kind of a mix of fantastical and mechanical intervention, she winds up binding him to herself. He's basically living inside of her. He is acting as her shadow, and they need to figure out how to go about getting him out. This is an unheard of thing to have done. It's potentially a dangerous thing to have done, and this is the position they find themselves in. They wind up kind of going out on various quests along the way and picking up some additional characters as they go and building an interesting relationship, being that they're both inside her mind. So with that, I am enjoying this quite a lot. It does dump you in the very beginning into this world, and you kind of have to scramble to figure out what's going on and where the story is going to take you, especially if you're like me and didn't really fully read the synopsis. I really like Kerstin as our main character. She's feisty, she's opinionated, she speaks her mind, and it seems like there's a lot going on in this world. I will say it took a little bit to get my feet under me, but given that it's a pretty chunky book. It's over 400. It's actually not that long, but it is pretty considerable in terms of how much the author is packing in. Toward the middle, my interest dipped here and there. I think maybe it was because I was out and about on the weekend and only listening to the audio for a little bit. Sorry if you're hearing Kailee in the background. She's speaking up to the neighbors. But I'm in a rush to get to work. And I think somewhat the kind of traveling portion lost my attention a little bit as I was driving around just listening to the audio. I did wind up picking up the physical book again with the audio alongside it after I got home, and that brought my attention back into it. I'm now about 60% of the way through, and I am really looking forward to seeing where this goes. It is marketed as standalone, though I have heard there's some questions about that because the ending doesn't really feel wrapped up, so I'm looking into whether there's maybe plans for a sequel. So I will have an update on that by the time I finish this book, but so far looking forward to continuing. Okay, I'm here with a couple of updates, and first off, I finished Asunder this morning on my way to work using the audiobook, and I was fully in it at the end of this book. I struggled last night. I really wanted to finish the book last night, but woke up twice realizing I had fallen asleep, which was 100% me, not the book. And I kept rewinding it. So I wound up with only 20% of it left when I woke up this morning by the time I figured out where I tuned out. So that was me, not the book. But this 100% is not a standalone. It is very open-ended at the end of this. It feels like a complete book. It's not like you just are taking the story along and stopping on one page, but it definitely needs more. It needs resolutions. There's a big bang of a finish and a lot of questions and wondering what's next. So very happily, I was able to talk to someone. I read Esme's review of this book. I'll try to remember to link that down below because if you're not following the reviews that Esme puts out, you're missing out. And it mentions needing book 2, so I did check in and got confirmation that there is in fact word on a sequel for this. So the author has talked about working on it. So there's hope that we're going to get the answers. We know we're going to get the answers. So I will be looking forward to that. I think overall in this, I really liked our main character, Karis, and Farain, who is the man that she winds up bound to, and the way their relationship progresses. They don't have the ability to really have any space from each other, so they get to know each other very quickly, and I really enjoyed seeing that relationship develop. They meet some additional people or bring people in from Karis's life along the way. We get a bit of a found family trope going on, which I always enjoy in books. So there was a lot in this one that really worked for me. The world building was definitely my favorite part. It definitely has a lot of dark moments, dark creatures and magic and all of that. So this was really a good read for me. I did struggle in a few places with my enjoyment dipping a bit, so it wasn't quite a full 5-star read for me, but it was a very strong 4-star. So I'm excited to be able to recommend this one. It is coming out on August 20th. And then looking at what I needed to read, I've decided that I'm just gonna push through a few more arcs that I'm excited to read and make this my next priority vlog, partially just because I want to get to some of these books and also partially because I looked at how many arcs I have for September on my September TBR and realized I might need to get out 2 episodes next month. So let's get this one taken care of. I started a second arc today and I made it halfway in, and that was Sacrificial Animals by Kailee Pedersen. And this is one that I have an audio arc from Macmillan Audio. This is a horror book and it also comes out on August 20th. The blurb for this one talks about the book being based on the author's own experience. She was adopted out of China and grew up on a farm in Nebraska. So she's drawing from her own life, she's following Nick, who is, depending on which time frame we're looking at, either a young boy or a young man. And he was raised with his brother on a farm in Nebraska. Their father is not the best of men. He is abusive. He is forcing them to do things like hunting and killing that they're not comfortable with. And it wasn't a great childhood. Nick's brother Joshua was much more of his father's son in terms of following along with some of the things that their father really wanted Joshua and Nick to do with him. In the present day, their father is sick. He's dying. And very surprisingly to both of them, he's invited them to come back home to take care of him. He and his oldest son Joshua are on the outs because Joshua married a Chinese woman and their father is very much not okay with that. And clearly there's some racism going on there. There's a big breach in the relationship, but Nick wants to go back. He wants his brother and his brother's wife to come home with him, and the father is open to having all of them there. Nick himself feels drawn to his brother's wife, so there's some sort of potential for relationship there as well. And as we're flipping back and forth between the older timeline and the present timeline, we're seeing hints of the supernatural, maybe. So far, honestly, this is feeling very much like a literary fiction family drama. In my Snakes vlog that recently went up, I read Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver, and this has a lot of those same feelings, although this one's a much shorter read, and I'm not feeling the same about it feeling too long as I did with that book a little bit. But having read them so close together, because I just finished Demon Copperhead a couple days ago, I think is coloring my enjoyment of this one just a bit. But I also have looked at a couple of reviews that say the first half of the book is on the slow end, and the second half is where things start to take off and start to get more into the horror that I went into this wanting. And the blurb talks about it being tied to Chinese mythology and horror and all of that. So I'm looking forward to continuing on and see where this winds up. I think my plan for this evening is to probably do some reading outside with the dog. I've got a super early morning training tomorrow. I have to be logged in by 7:45 a.m. But the good news is I can actually do it from home since it is such an early session. And I have hope that I can squeeze in some reading during some of the breaks from that training as well. So that's my plan for the evening. My plan for tomorrow morning. I have this. I have a couple more arcs that I'm trying to fit into this video before I wrap it up at the end of the week or at the weekend. So we'll see how it goes, and I will be back once I have some more thoughts. Okay, I finished up Sacrificial Animals last night, and while it did pick up a bit in the interest department for me toward the end, it still just didn't hook me. I think it was a little too late. The ending definitely gets more gory, more action, all of that going on, but overall the feel of the book to me feels much more literary fiction, family drama, bad parent, difficult sibling relationship. All of those elements stood out a lot more. I did like the way the Chinese elements were brought into the story and the way that develops and mingles with the story, both in the past and the present really toward the end. But it just, something about it just didn't click for me. I think the writing was good. The character development was fairly good. Although in some ways I think some of the characters were less developed than others. I just didn't feel like the pacing really paid off for me, and the horror elements I really wanted to come in sooner. So this winds up being a low 3-star for me. If I'm judging it more on its merits than enjoyment, probably a 3.5, but still a 3 on Goodreads. And then I am now halfway into a new arc. So that one is Red River Road by Anna Downs. This is another one I received from Macmillan Audio, and this one will be coming out on August 27th. I really enjoyed her previous thriller, Safe Place, I think, or Safe Places, something along those lines. I don't have it up in front of me, but I was excited to get offered a copy of her newest one. This is set in Australia. Phoebe is a young woman living the hashtag van life on her own, exploring Australia and posting all about it on social media. But then she goes missing and no trace is found of her. So with this book, we are following Katie, who is Phoebe's sister, and the police aren't finding answers, so Katie's going out, following in her sister's footsteps, using her social media as kind of a guide to see if she can find out more about her sister. We then also meet Beth, who's our second POV character, and she's on the run from something. It's a little bit shady for the reader. We don't know what she's running from initially, and her appearance is quite the thing because she just climbs into Katie's van and kind of surprises the heck out of her. So we're following those two POVs, and then we get a third one that isn't mentioned in the synopsis, which is a young boy's perspective or a teenage boy's perspective, and I'm about at the halfway point and still not entirely sure how that's going to connect in, so I'm very interested to keep going. I like the audiobook for this one. It is very much a slow burn type of mystery feel, and there's shady people around. There's general talk about, safety with posting your everywhere about in a very followable itinerary on the internet. The police don't seem to want to help, but we're not sure what has kind of made them unwilling to talk to Katie. That all is having me very intrigued. So this one's going better. I'm enjoying it. I don't know that I have 5-star feels for it quite yet, but I'm hopeful that the slow burn so far is going to take off to a wild ending with some good twists and turns. So I will be back once I finish that off. I'm about to sit down for 7 hours of back-to-back trainings and meetings right now, but at least I'm doing it from home, so hopefully I can squeeze in some breaks for reading. Okay, I'm back with a really quick update on Red River Road by Anna Downs, and I am currently on a break from the training that I'm in, so need to hurry before they start talking in the background. But I wound up really enjoying this one. It was extremely slow burn for the first half, but then kind of that 60 to 90% of the book, I was extremely hooked. I had a hard time putting it down last night, but kept falling asleep entirely on me and the fact it was 1 a.m., not on the book. So I finished it up just this morning in between training sessions. So I think the author did a really good job of building the tension in that slow burn beginning and then the action really taking off in the end. I liked the way that we got multiple characters and the way their stories kind of worked alongside each other and then began to blend, and I think all of that was really well done. I was surprised by some of the outcomes. I think I figured a few of them out a little bit earlier than they were fully revealed in the book, but I definitely did not have them figured out all the way from the very beginning. I got a little concerned when I hit the 90% mark and it seemed like the whole storyline had come to its big epic conclusion on why everything slowed down again. And we do get kind of a slow after crisis is over kind of moment for a couple of chapters. It turns out it's not as long as I thought because there is like an hour-long author's note or possibly other materials after the book is over. I haven't finished reading all of that yet, but there is definitely kind of the book coming to a summit, and then you get a little bit of an ease down with a couple of chapters and then an epilogue before the ending. So I think if you go in with the right expectations and you go into this book expecting there to be a slow build to an ultimate payoff, I think you will enjoy this one. It wasn't a 5-star read for me, but it was definitely a high, solid 4-star read. So very excited for this one. I do need to go back. I really enjoyed her first book. I really enjoyed this one. I need to pick up the one that came out a couple years ago because I've never read that one. So I will do that and definitely be looking for more from her in the future. So with that, I think I'm going to try to fit in one more, maybe two more. We'll see how how it goes before I wrap this up. So it's now Thursday. I've got probably till the end of the weekend to feel comfortable filming everything and then having time to edit. So we'll see what else I get up to, and I'll be back once I know what that's going to be. I decided to go with William by Mason Coile as my next Architect read. This is a gifted copy from Putnam. I also have the audiobook from PRH Audio, and this one will be coming out on September 10th. The pitch for this one caught my attention because it's called Psychological Horror, A Haunting, where the entity causing the haunting is AI. And it's a really short read. The audiobook is only about 5 hours long. So I wanted to give some initial impressions really early on in the book since it is so short. So I'm only about 30% of the way into this book. As the book opens, we meet Henry and Lily, and they are a married couple. Lily is significantly pregnant, and Henry, we quickly find out, is afraid to go outside of his home. And there's a lot of tension in their marriage because of this. How is he going to be a father? Because he can't leave the house. And the marriage is clearly on the rocks. Henry is working on an engineering project that he's been obsessed with, and this is to create artificial intelligence. And he's achieved this. He's named this entity, this AI, William. Lily has some friends over, and they are introduced to William, and things begin to go awry. From the beginning, this starts out a little bit slow. Definitely, I think it's going to fit the slow burn category, but very quickly learning about Henry's mental health issues and starting to see small signs of this project he's been working on and how obsessed with this project he is had me intrigued. And we can definitely sense why Lily is so disturbed by what's going on. So I think the author is developing the characters well for the brief amount of time I've spent with them so far. So I'm really interested to see how the rest of this book goes and how I wind up enjoying it overall. I don't know necessarily that I'm feeling obsessed with it yet, but I think it's one that I'm going to want to sit down and just kind of read on my Kindle in one sitting. The audiobook is fine. It's been good to give me the introduction to the story while I've been away from my Kindle, but I think it's one that I'm going to absorb and get more immersed into reading it physically. So I'm going to give that a try tonight, and I will be back once I finish this one. I'm hopeful it won't take too long because the blurb itself calls it a one sitting read, and definitely since it's a 5-hour audio, I think that's going to be accurate, aside from the part where I took the time to drive home and update you and eat dinner. But other than that, one sitting. So I will be back once I have my final thoughts on this one, and since this is so quick, I'm pretty sure I'm going to add one more in. So kind of figuring out what that's going to be. I finished William, and I wound up with very mixed thoughts on this one. I even just marked it as read on Goodreads and didn't put in a rating because my brain just wasn't quite sure what to make of it. I think ultimately this had a lot of buzzwords, a lot of things that worked well for me. It has a smart house that goes very wrong. It has AI that goes very wrong. And those are things that definitely will work for me in a book. I like the idea of a haunted house being haunted by the AI. That as a concept I really enjoyed. I think what didn't work for me were the characters. And we've got Henry and his wife and their pregnancy and the marriage dynamics not going well, and some of the relationships we find out about the coworkers who come in. I didn't care that much about the characters or the relationship dynamic. That just wasn't gelling for me. Paige, who's the friend who comes in, she was very off-putting in the way she was reacting to everybody, and in particular Henry, and we do eventually find out the reason behind that, but it was off-putting in the moment. So when things were happening to her, I just wasn't invested enough to care. None of the characters really had me fully invested in the outcomes for them. It did take some twists and turns that I didn't expect, so I did like that aspect of it. The ultimate kind of outcome at the end I was interested in. So there were a lot of ups and downs. It was a very fast must read. If it sounds like something that might be interesting to you, it goes so quickly, so it would be worth checking out and just giving a try and see if it works better for you. I think it's going to wind up a 3 for me. I kind of kept going back and forth in my mind on whether I needed to bump it up, bump it down. I think ultimately characters didn't quite work for me, but the concepts and some of the plot elements did. I maybe wanted a little more from the horror on page. Some of the scenes that I think could have been really creepy and really kind of almost physical in the way they would impact the reader just didn't quite click for me. So ultimately this wasn't a huge win. It was an okay read, but not something that I'm saying everyone needs to rush out and read personally. So hopefully my final book will go a little bit better. I have high hopes, so I will be back once I have some thoughts on that. I've decided to pick up You're Safe Here by Leslie Stevens as my final arc attack. This is another one that's going a bit back in time to catch an arc that I didn't get a chance to read before it came out. This one came out on June 25th, and I received it a little bit too close to the publication date for me to get to it in time, so it's been waiting for me, and then very kindly sent me a finished copy as well, so I decided I really needed to get to it. And now I am 40% of the way through this one, or 41% technically, if you want to go that far. This is set in a futuristic world. Technology has taken off, and you can live in a place, in a smart home basically, that's a pod that does everything for you. You don't have to vacuum because the floors will just vacuum themselves. They'll heat themselves. They'll make you comfortable. This is a 2060 where climate change has decimated the world. We're set in California, but it's not the California that I would recognize as living in today. The coast has been really changed, but one particular tech company has created an escape from the world. And these are pods that are set out into the Pacific Ocean for an individual to stay in for basically a wellness retreat. Within this retreat, you get fed, you get yoga programs, you get therapy, you get everything you need to come back a refreshed and renewed person. The book begins with Maggie, who is relatively newly pregnant. She is dealing with some trauma from her past, with a difficult relationship with her girlfriend, and she gets the opportunity to go out into this well pod for a 6-week program, and it seems like the perfect answer to everything she needs. We're also following her girlfriend Noah, who is working for the company behind WellPod and begins to see that there's stuff going on that the public is not meant to know. There's danger to the travelers who are in these pods, and she needs to try to figure out a way to get Maggie and keep her safe. We're also getting chapters from Emmett's point of view, going back in time, kind of seeing how this company was developed, how these pods came about. And so far I'm finding the technology especially really interesting. I'm very intrigued to see what went wrong between Maggie and Noah, and I think the switching POVs is working well for me in terms of seeing how things work. I really am liking the world building, especially in here. I'm looking forward to a little more character development. I stopped at the 40% mark because there's different sections to the book. We've been in the mist section. The next section is fog, so I figured it was a good place to give my initial thought. And then I will be back once I get to the end to bring you my final thoughts on this one. Okay, I finished up my final arc yesterday, and I had mixed feelings on this one. I think this was not exactly what I expected going into it. That might have been part of the problem. What really worked well for me was the sci-fi elements in here. I liked the way the pods worked and getting to see the inner workings of the pod as we got further into the book, how the whole concept was developed, and the way this was a response to kind of the world's destruction. Much of California has kind of fallen into ruin over climate change and everything else. I think the discussions themes on climate change could have gone a little bit further and been a little bit more pronounced in this book, but I think that there were some good discussions had. The pods, the way that played into concepts of a smart house in a different way, all worked really well for me. We get little snippets of what the old world outside of the technology looked like, and I like to see that kind of contrast a little bit. I could have maybe stood to see a little bit more of what life outside of this realm of pods looked like. What didn't work quite as well for me was just the characters' relationships in here. We are dealing with very messy situations between the people in this book, and the way that gets revealed and discovered, I think, didn't fully capture my attention. I was in it for the fun sci-fi, not so much for the messy drama between people. Quite a bit of the ending winds up a little on the ambiguous side as well, which kind of suits the book. There's a lot of things in this book that blur the lines between reality and AI and belief and dream and all of those types of things. So I guess having some unanswered questions in the end kind of goes along those same lines, but there were some things that I would like to see a little more resolution to. Overall, I think for the concept and everything that this book was trying to do, it winds up being like a 3.5 for me. But with that, I will be wrapping up this arc attack here. As I'm pretty sure I already mentioned, there are quite a few things coming up in the very near future that I want to get to as arcs for next month, so I think this definitely is a series that will be back in September, probably sooner rather than later, but for now I will wrap this up here. Have you read any of the books that I reviewed in this particular vlog? Are there any on this list that you're going to be adding to your shopping cart? Let me know all the things. Are there any upcoming releases you're particularly excited for? Any recent releases you would definitely recommend because you've read them? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, why don't you go ahead and leave me a beachy emoji to go off of my most recent book about pods set sail in the ocean. For now, I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button if you enjoyed this video, and subscribe if you would be interested in watching more of my content. And I will leave you here and catch you very soon in the next video.